Afternoon, this is the next topic in the maths series for this year. So we're going to look at upper and lower bounds. The stuff we did on significant figures, I guess, is vaguely useful for the final answer here. But upper and lower bounds, you did cover it in lower remove, and so this should be a refresher. Okay, so let's look at a question. A shelf was measured as 140 centimetres to the nearest 10 centimetres. What was the maximum and the minimum length of the shelf? Okay, now you have done this, as I said, so maybe have a think to yourself, see if you can answer this question without me. Okay, so what you might think about, well, to the nearest 10 centimetres. Let's do some terminology first, actually. So upper and lower bounds. Upper bound would be the maximum length, and the lower bound would be the minimum length. Okay, so let's think about 140 centimetres on a number line. Okay, 140, 130. I'm going up in tens because we've rounded to the nearest 10. So if we think about what the biggest value it could have been, the shelf could have been, before we rounded it. Well, if it was 145 centimetres, anything less than 145 centimetres, we would have rounded it down. So we can say that 145 centimetres is like the boundary point. Okay, so it's like the boundary. So, for example, 144.999, we would have rounded that down. So 145 would be the boundary point. Although at 145 we would have rounded up to 150, we say it's the boundary. Anything less, we would have rounded it down to 140 centimetres to the nearest 10 centimetres. So we call this the boundary or the fence. Okay, I'll just summarise that. Anything smaller than 145, and we would have rounded it down. Okay. So 145 centimetres is the upper bound. And the upper bound is the maximum. Great. If we look at the minimum, hopefully the minimum will make sense in the same way. It's the lower bound. So, the lower bound, if we're rounding to the nearest 10, then the smallest it could have been before we rounded it, well, if we look at 135, if it was 135 or more, we would have rounded it up to 140 centimetres. So 135, in this case, is the boundary, it's the fence. So 135 is that minimum value. This is pretty straightforward. So let's look at another question which you can have a go yourself. So Adam weighs 70 kilograms to the nearest kilogram. What's the upper and lower bound of his weight? Okay, so maybe pause the video and see if you can answer the question yourself. Right, let's look at a number line again. So 70 kilograms, we go up in kilograms since we're looking to the nearest kilogram. 70 kilograms, 71 and 69 kilograms. So, since we're rounding to the nearest kilogram, the biggest it could have been would have been right here. This would have been the fence, the boundary point, 70.5. Anything smaller, and we would have rounded down to 70 kilograms, to the nearest kilogram. So this would be the upper bound. The lower bound would have been here, 69.5, because if we're rounding to the nearest kilogram, 69.5 kilograms or more, we would have rounded up to 70. So again, that's the boundary or the fence. So the upper bound would have been 70.5 kilograms and the lower bound 69.5 kilograms. Okay, sorry about that. Right, what I think I'll do is pause this video. We'll stop this small video here and I'll make another video for the next questions.